She was an American girl chasing the magic of forgotten places, until she found one that didn't want to be found. Sienna Thomas vanished after stepping into a stranger's car in rural Russia, but not before sending a cryptic video that left even her family too terrified to watch it twice. What she uncovered in that village was never meant to be seen, and the people who live there have made sure it stays that way. But the last entry in her journal changed everything. What if she never truly left? What if someone else is already following her instructions? Sienna Thomas had always lived for the in-between spaces, the alleyways of Lisbon, the forests of Slovakia, the coffee shops that didn't show up on TripAdvisor but offered slices of heaven through cracked ceramic cups. A child of divorced parents and the American suburbs, she'd grown up watching planes fly over her backyard like taunts from a better life. Her journal was filled with dreams of places she couldn't pronounce at first, and by 29, she had already crossed borders most people didn't know existed. But this trip was different. She wasn't just traveling for beauty anymore. She was chasing silence, trying to drown the echo of a breakup that had torn through her like shrapnel. Her social media posts from this journey showed misty train windows, faded Cyrillic signs, and captions about soul-searching. But no one knew that in her private notes, she kept describing a shadow. First in Latvia. Then again in Belarus. Someone she thought she saw in two separate train stations. Same scarf, same limp. But logic told her she was being paranoid. Still, her handwriting grew tighter with every page. Either I'm losing my mind, she scribbled in a hostel in Smolensk, or someone's following me. Again. Yet despite the warning signs, she pressed onward. Russia had always fascinated her, not the tourist-drenched cities like Moscow or St. Petersburg, but the veiled towns far removed from the world map spotlight. Her plan was to take a quiet train ride to a forgotten village called Raskova, then hike to a nearby lake she'd seen in a Soviet-era photography book. It's untouched, she wrote to her friend Sarah. Like the air there has never been breathed by a Westerner. Her arrival in Raskova was marked by a sense of cinematic isolation. The train station was barely a platform. No taxis. No tourists. Just fog, pine trees, and a single man holding a faded sign that read Sienna in capital letters. She hadn't told anyone to meet her. But the man smiled kindly, even apologetically, and introduced himself as Ivan. "You go lake?" he asked in broken English. Her gut clenched, but she nodded. It was early morning, and she didn't want to wait hours for the next train. The man looked harmless. Mid-40s. Plaid shirt. A beat-up red Lada. He opened the passenger door, and with one long breath of pine and frost, Sienna stepped in. The engine rumbled like a growl from under the earth. She took one last look at the train station, then pulled out her phone to drop a pin for Sarah. No signal, it blinked. Just as the car took a left turn down a road the map didn't show. The ride with Ivan began in disarming silence, broken only by the occasional rattle of the car's suspension and the crisp, intermittent gusts of wind brushing against the windows. Sienna tried to make conversation, asking where he was from, how long he had lived in Raskova, and if he drove tourists often, but Ivan's answers were short, almost too short, like someone reading off a memorized script. "Long time," he muttered, eyes locked on the road. "Not many come here." He smiled, but there was something off about it. His lips curled, but his eyes didn't follow. They remained fixed, calculating, as though weighing the worth of every second she spent in his car. The GPS on her phone still refused to load, only offering a frozen map with her last known location miles behind them. She gripped the phone tightly anyway, pretending to scroll, her thumb hovering over the emergency settings she had preloaded before the trip. But no signal meant no lifeline, and no lifeline meant she would have to rely entirely on instinct. "How far is the lake?" she asked, glancing at the thickening trees outside. Ivan paused, then said, "Soon. But first, real place. You want see old Russia?" Before she could answer, he veered off the narrow paved road and onto a dirt path veiled by evergreens, the tires crunching over ice-packed mud and dried pine needles. The forest seemed to grow denser with every passing minute, swallowing what little daylight remained under a canopy of tangled branches. Sienna's breath fogged the passenger side window as she tried to keep her rising anxiety from spilling into her voice. "Is this a shortcut?" she asked. Ivan chuckled softly, but didn't respond. He hummed an old Russian folk tune under his breath, the melody strange and hypnotic. When they finally broke through the trees, a clearing opened like a secret stage. Rows of decaying wooden houses arranged in a crooked semicircle, their faded green and blue shutters hanging loose on rusted hinges. A single dirt path wound through the center, flanked by ancient birch trees that leaned like eavesdropping giants. "This is it," Ivan said, almost reverently. "Zarakai. Before, many people. Now, few." Sienna squinted through the windshield, heart pounding. The place looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. No cars, no power lines, no movement. Just stillness. "I've never heard of this village," she said cautiously. "Is it near the lake?" Ivan nodded slowly. "Yes. Very near. I show you soon." He parked beside a well with a rotting wooden crank and stepped out without another word, motioning for her to follow. She hesitated. Every instinct screamed to stay inside, but she didn't want to provoke suspicion. She slipped on her coat, slid her phone into her inner jacket pocket, and stepped outside. The air was sharper here, laced with smoke and soil, and somewhere distant, a crow cawed once, then fell silent. Ivan led her past the houses, pointing at things he claimed were historic, though he never offered real details. One house had dolls hanging by their necks in the window, Soviet-era toys, yellowed and water-damaged, their eyes gouged out or missing. Another had handprints smeared in ash across the siding, like someone had tried to claw their way out. She asked if anyone still lived here. He paused, looked back, and said only, "Sometimes." They reached a house with a red door, rare color among the otherwise faded architecture. He opened it and gestured for her to enter. "You wait here. I get something." Sienna stepped inside reluctantly, immediately struck by the smell, mildew, kerosene, and something coppery she couldn't name. The room was dim, lit only by the dying light leaking through the cracked wooden boards. She turned slowly, noting the dusty wallpaper, an overturned stool, and a stack of yellowed photographs scattered across the table. Her fingers trembled as she picked one up. It showed a woman standing beside the same well they had parked near, but the photo looked recent. The woman was wearing a North Face jacket and black leggings, clothes not available during the Soviet era. She flipped through more. All different people. All modern. All tourists. One of them was a young man she thought she recognized from an online travel blog. Peter, a backpacker who had gone missing in Eastern Europe the year before. Before she could dig deeper, the door creaked. Ivan stepped inside, holding a steaming mug. "Tea," he said. "To warm you." She forced a smile and accepted it, but didn't drink. "I think I'll head to the lake now," she said, voice tight. Ivan's smile froze. "No. Not yet. Night comes. You stay." The way he said it didn't sound like a suggestion. She backed toward the door. "Actually, I have to get going. My friend's expecting me." Ivan stepped forward. "No signal here. No friend come." His hand reached for her arm, but she twisted away. "I need to go," she snapped, pushing past him. He didn't follow immediately, and when she reached the car, the keys were gone. She turned toward the house and saw Ivan watching her from the window, expression unreadable. The sun dipped below the trees, casting the village in blue-gray twilight. Sienna backed away from the car, heart racing, and disappeared down one of the village's other narrow paths. Behind her, she swore she heard a second set of footsteps crunching in the snow, and they didn't belong to Ivan. The farther Sienna walked, the more the village seemed to unravel like a memory not meant to be revisited. The houses leaned in unnatural directions, their wooden frames warped by time and rot, as if even the architecture itself had grown tired of standing. Strange symbols were carved into many of the doorframes, spirals, slashes, and a repeated hourglass shape that made her skin crawl every time she passed it. She tried to retrace her steps, but the forest that once bordered the road now seemed to encroach into the edges of the village, distorting her sense of direction. It was as though the place was folding in on itself, trapping her in its quiet jaws. As she passed what looked like an abandoned schoolhouse, she noticed a figure watching her from a second-story window, just for a moment, before vanishing behind a curtain. Her breath caught in her throat. Children's voices drifted through the wind, but they were warped, stretched, like a cassette left out in the sun. When she tried the front door of the schoolhouse, it was locked. She pressed her ear against it and heard something scrape slowly across the wooden floor on the other side. She stepped back, heart pounding, and continued moving, passing a barn where the wooden slats had been burned halfway up, scorched black like a memory of fire that never fully died. Through the gaps in the walls, she saw rows of suitcases, all labeled in different languages. One was bright pink with a cracked sticker of the Eiffel Tower. Another was a wheeled carry-on she recognized as a popular American brand. All looked like they hadn't been touched in months, maybe years. She tried to open the barn door, but it groaned loudly, and a dog began barking from somewhere unseen. A voice followed, muffled, guttural, and unmistakably angry. She didn't wait to be seen. She ducked behind the side of the barn and ran into a narrow alley between two cabins, her boots slipping on ice. One of the doors opened slightly as she passed, revealing a pale old woman with long white hair and cataract-clouded eyes. "He watches," the woman whispered. "Don't let him know you know." Then the door slammed shut again. The air was thicker here, heavy with moisture and decay. She could feel it in her lungs like mold. Every house seemed to have a story it was trying not to tell. As the sun began to set fully, a deep orange light cast the village into long shadows, and Sienna realized she had no idea where the main road was anymore. She hadn't eaten, hadn't drunk anything since that offered tea, and her legs ached from the tension. She finally stopped near what appeared to be a chapel, its steeple half-collapsed and a rusted bell hanging loosely from its cradle. Inside, she found pews covered in dust and straw, a cracked crucifix on the wall, and in the back corner, an altar of bones. Animal bones, she told herself, though something about the shape of the skulls suggested otherwise. Arranged around them were faded photographs, little trinkets, coins, watches, rings. Offerings, maybe. But to what? Her body buzzed with dread, and when she turned to leave, she nearly collided with a man in the doorway. Not Ivan. There. Dressed in a coat 2 sizes too big, his face shadowed beneath a flat cap. He said nothing, just stared. Sienna forced herself past him and walked briskly back into the open. Lights began flickering on in the windows now, dim, yellowish glows that somehow made the village feel darker, not brighter. She finally spotted the red-doored house Ivan had brought her to, but he was nowhere in sight. The car was still gone. Out of desperation, she tried the house again, hoping to retrieve any of her belongings, but the door was locked now. She banged on it, called Ivan's name, but got no response. Then, from the edge of her vision, she saw 2 villagers standing silently in the middle of the dirt road, watching her. Neither moved. She blinked, and a third figure had joined them. Then a fourth. None of them spoke. None of them approached. They just watched. Her breath grew shallow, chest rising and falling too fast. She took off running down what she hoped was the main road, dodging roots and slipping on ice patches until her lungs burned. She reached a fork in the path and stopped. Each direction looked equally unfamiliar, and the forest had completely boxed in the village from this side. That's when she heard the chanting. Low. Monotone. In a language she didn't understand. It was coming from behind her, growing louder. She turned and saw a procession of villagers walking toward her. Men, women, children, all holding candles that didn't flicker despite the wind. Their faces were painted white, their eyes blackened with soot. Ivan led them, wearing a long coat she hadn't seen before and a look that was neither kind nor cruel, but ancient. She backed away, stumbled, and hit the ground. The chanting stopped. Silence. Then Ivan spoke. "You leave now?" he asked, softly. "You not ready?" She stood slowly, trembling, her eyes darting for an escape. He reached into his coat and pulled out something shiny, her phone. He tossed it onto the ground at her feet. "Battery dead," he said. "Like rest." Sienna snatched it and ran. The last thing she saw before the forest swallowed her was Ivan smiling. Not the warm smile he wore before, but a crooked, hollow one that reached only one eye. Behind him, the villagers stood still as statues, their candles glowing with a light that didn't look like fire at all. The forest felt colder now, like it had watched her run and chosen to shiver in response. Sienna moved without any sense of direction, every breath a ragged fog and every step a guess in the dark. She didn't know how long she wandered, but eventually the trees thinned just enough to reveal the jagged silhouette of another structure. Half buried in bramble, its roof caved in, and shutters twisted like broken fingers. She pushed her way toward it, thorns scratching her arms, and slipped inside through a splintered panel. The air was stale and damp, thick with the smell of rotten old tobacco. She collapsed against the wall, clutching her useless phone, then lit its flashlight, praying for even 1% battery, but the screen was lifeless. She tried to slow her breathing, listening carefully. Outside, the wind howled like a dying animal. But beneath it, something else moved. Slow, deliberate, wooden creaks like someone pacing upstairs. Except there was no second floor. Her heart raced. She stood, searching the room, and found a rusted nail jutting from a beam, just sharp enough to serve as a weapon if needed. Clutching it tightly, she backed into a corner and waited, but nothing came. Eventually, exhaustion overwhelmed her, and she drifted into a shallow, haunted sleep. When she awoke, the light through the cracks had changed, suggesting dawn, or what passed for it in this part of the world. Her legs ached, her lips were dry, and her stomach clenched with hunger. She needed to move. Find help. Something. Anything. She stepped out into the daylight and nearly screamed. A man stood several feet away, barefoot, gaunt, and wearing a shredded coat over bare skin. He didn't look at her directly, just mumbled to himself in Russian and wandered past her as if she wasn't there. His eyes were glassy, his face pale and bruised. She called out to him, but he kept walking until he disappeared into the woods. Panic surged. She bolted toward the direction he'd come from and found herself back at the edge of the village, Zarakai or whatever it truly was, only now it looked different. Less abandoned. Smoke curled from a chimney. Curtains moved behind glass. It was as if the entire place had reshaped itself overnight. She moved quietly between houses, keeping low. A door creaked behind her, and she turned fast, hiding beside a shed. From the shadows, she spotted two men carrying something wrapped in cloth, long, heavy, and limp. They spoke in hushed tones before loading it into the back of a cart hitched to a tractor. When they left, she followed at a distance, heart pounding like a drum in her ears. The cart stopped at a large house near the center of the village, painted grey, with boarded-up windows and a bell nailed above the door. As they entered, she slipped behind the building and found a small, grime-covered window. She peered inside and nearly dropped to her knees. On the floor were photographs pinned to the wall, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all Polaroids, all of people who looked like travelers. Each photo had a number beneath it. Some crossed out in red. Others circled. And in the far corner of the room stood a small table holding passports, phones, wallets, souvenirs of lives erased. She pulled back just as someone inside turned. She fled, lungs searing, tears stinging her eyes. She ducked into another house at random, slammed the door shut, and bolted it behind her. It was dark, silent, until she heard it, a whisper. Then another. Not just one voice, but many. She froze, holding her breath, trying to place the sound. The walls. The whispers were coming from inside the walls. She pressed her ear to the wood and listened. A girl was crying. Another voice murmured something unintelligible. Then laughter. But none of it was human. It was distorted, layered, overlapping like a chorus of madness echoing through the hollow bones of the building. She staggered back, only to trip over something soft. A rug. She kicked it aside and uncovered a trapdoor. It was padlocked, but rusted. She used the nail to pry at the hinge, sweating with effort until it snapped. She pulled open the hatch and descended into darkness, the musty scent of earth and mold rising to meet her. In the basement, she found rows of makeshift beds, old medical equipment, and boxes labeled in Cyrillic. She opened one. Inside were notebooks, journals. She flipped through them, realizing they were written by others like her. Tourists. Their entries varied in tone, some hopeful, some frantic, some descending into madness. One read, "They tell you to stay for your own safety. But the truth is, once you know, you can't leave. Not really." Another ended mid-sentence, ink smeared by what looked like blood. One journal had a photograph tucked inside, a selfie of a young woman in front of the red-doored house, dated just 3 months prior. The back of the photo had only 3 words scrawled in English: "Don't trust Ivan." Sienna sat back, overwhelmed, the room spinning. Footsteps creaked above. Then a soft voice echoed down the hatch. "You're not supposed to be here." She scrambled up the ladder, but the door slammed shut above her. Darkness swallowed her whole. The whispers returned. Closer this time. As if the walls themselves were breathing. 2 days later, half a world away, in a modest house outside Denver, Colorado, Sienna's younger brother, Luke Thomas, sat staring at his laptop screen, refreshing her Instagram page for the 100th time. The last post was from 3 days ago, an artful picture of frosted pine branches and a cryptic caption that read, "Not everything off the grid is beautiful." Her phone hadn't pinged since. He dismissed her silence at first, knowing how she loved disconnecting when deep in exploration, but something felt wrong this time. Then, just before midnight, an email arrived. No subject. No message body. Just a WeTransfer link. He clicked it, heart thumping. The file was a single video, blurry, low resolution, and corrupted in parts, like it had been transmitted from a dying device barely holding on. The timestamp read 3:42 a.m. In the video, Sienna's face appeared briefly, illuminated by the harsh beam of her phone's flashlight. Her voice shook. "If anyone sees this, don't come looking for me. There's something." The screen glitched violently, and the frame shifted to blackness before showing fragments of what looked like trees, snow, and at least 3 figures standing motionless in the distance. One moved, slowly, head tilting unnaturally as if studying the camera. Then it cut again. The final 5 seconds were the worst. Sienna screamed, abrupt, panicked, and abruptly silenced as the camera fell sideways. The screen froze on a final image, a blurry outline of what might have been Ivan's red coat, just visible at the edge of the frame. Luke showed the video to their parents, then to local authorities, but everyone treated it like a prank or digital hoax. "Could be AI, one officer said. Or she staged it. People do that now, for followers." But Luke knew better. He reached out to digital forensics experts, and one agreed to analyze the file more closely. What he found made even the skeptic fall silent. In the corrupted footage's background, frame by frame, hidden in the shadows of the trees, were more figures. Too many. Unmoving. Watching. And they hadn't blinked once. One analyst isolated audio that the human ear couldn't detect, whispers, layered in a frequency just below normal hearing. When amplified, the whispers repeated the same word in Russian, "Remain." The analyst backed out of the project, refusing to explain why. Meanwhile, a travel forum Sienna had once contributed to lit up with users posting questions. Had anyone been to Reskova? Had anyone heard of Zarakai? But search engines returned nothing. Maps showed no such village. Even archived Soviet records came up empty. It was as if the place had been scrubbed from history. But then, a backpacker from Lithuania shared something chilling. He'd traveled through the region a year ago and claimed to have encountered a man offering rides in a red Lada. Said his name was Ivan. Described the same smile, the same plaid shirt. He never took the ride, but snapped a picture of the man and the car from a distance. He posted it alongside his message. Luke stared at the image, heart freezing. It was Ivan. The timestamp on the photo was from 10 years earlier. The man hadn't aged a day. A viral campaign started under the hashtag #FindSienna, and amateur sleuths flooded the internet with theories. Some said she had entered a secret Soviet experimental town lost in time. Others believed she was caught in a cult's trap. A few swore it was all supernatural. But none could explain how a village could hide in plain sight, leave no trace, and swallow a person whole. Then came the second video. It was posted anonymously on a dark web forum specializing in lost media. It was much longer, 6 minutes, but badly degraded. The footage was stationary, like from a camera left recording on a surface. It showed Sienna in what looked like a small room, pacing, mumbling to herself, scribbling into a journal. Her eyes were wild, her hair matted. At one point, she turned to the camera and whispered, "It's not a village. It's a mouth." Her voice cracked on the last word. Then something crashed off screen and she bolted forward to shut the camera off. The final second was nothing but darkness. Luke froze the frame at that moment, and in the corner of the screen, barely visible, was a figure watching from a narrow gap in the wall. A face. Not Ivan's. Pale, expressionless, hollow eyes. The footage was traced back to an IP address routed through Belarus, but dead ends followed. Then came silence. Weeks passed. No new leads. No further messages. Just as hope began to fade, Luke received a brown envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a photograph, black and white, grainy, aged. It showed a group of people standing outside a building with a red door. In the back row was a face unmistakably like Sienna's, but the clothes were all from another era. The photo was dated 1986. Scrawled on the back was one sentence: "She learned too much." Spring in Russia arrived like a reluctant whisper, thawing the earth in slow, uneven pulses. Deep within the outskirts of the Bryansk forests, a Polish backpacker named Marek Kozlov was forging his way through a section of overgrown trail rarely touched by tourists. He wasn't chasing anything in particular, just the kind of solitude only forgotten nature could offer. The path was dense, winding, and dotted with relics of long-abandoned villages. Broken carts, moss-eaten fences, and structures warped by time into hollow skeletons of wood. It was there, near the roots of a birch tree tangled with old barbed wire, that Marek noticed a patch of disturbed earth. Something jutted from the dirt, barely visible beneath layers of wet leaves and moss. It was a notebook, leather-bound, torn along the edges, and water-damaged beyond repair in places. He peeled it open carefully, revealing pages scrawled in uneven English. At first, he assumed it was trash. But then he saw the name written on the inside cover in smudged ink: Sienna Thomas. The entries began abruptly, mid-thought, as if the writer had no time for structure or reflection. The early pages recounted her first impressions of the village: the unease, the symbols, the eerie stillness. But as he read deeper, her writing grew frantic, desperate, dotted with sketches of things that made Marek's skin crawl: figures with hollow faces, diagrams of the village layout, and most unsettling, a drawing of a tree whose roots twisted into the shape of a screaming mouth. Her words hinted at a pattern, a process. Visitors were lured under the guise of hospitality, then observed, tested. Those who sensed the truth too soon were made to disappear quickly. Others were manipulated, broken down until they gave in to whatever the village wanted from them. The journal hinted at something ancient living beneath the soil, feeding off memory, devouring identity. She wrote of people whose names she could no longer remember, even though she had spoken to them hours earlier. "The longer you stay," she wrote, "the more it takes. First your time, then your mind, then your name." Marek's hands trembled as he turned to the final pages. One entry was written in a scrawl so erratic it was barely legible. "I tried to run again last night. The forest moved. I swear it wasn't the same path. I circled 3 times. Every time, I ended back at the chapel. It's not a building, it's a warning." The very last page was a list, steps, almost like instructions. 1. If you find this, don't go to the village. 2. If you're already there, pretend you don't see the signs. 3. Don't drink the tea. 4. If you hear the whispers, cover your ears. 5. And if you see Ivan's car again, run. Do not speak. Do not make eye contact. Just run. The final sentence was half finished, breaking off mid-word, as if she'd been interrupted while writing it. Marek's chest tightened as he closed the journal and looked around the forest, suddenly hyper-aware of every crackling branch, every bird that had gone silent. He packed the journal and hiked faster, refusing to stop until he reached the next village with Wi-Fi. From there, he uploaded scans of the pages and shared them with a European missing persons organization, along with Sienna's name and the location where he found it. The response was swift and unsettling. The organization confirmed that Sienna Thomas had been declared missing, but Russian authorities had closed the case due to lack of evidence and absence of credible leads. Marek's location was checked against old Soviet maps. Official records showed no settlements in that part of the forest. But when an investigative journalist from Finland followed up, she found something deeply disturbing. Satellite imagery showed irregular ground depressions in the shape of crude roads, matching the rough layout sketched in Sienna's notebook. More alarming, a drone flight over the area lost signal for 7 minutes, and when the footage resumed, the drone's GPS showed it had looped in a perfect figure 8, twice, despite straight flight commands. The story began to spread, first through niche paranormal forums, then through larger outlets. People obsessed over the phrase, "It's not a village. It's a mouth," dissecting it across Reddit threads and YouTube conspiracy channels. Some believed Zarakai was a Cold War relic, a place used for psychological experiments that had warped into something darker. Others swore it was supernatural, an entity, not a place. But then, everything went quiet again. Marek, who had agreed to speak with a documentary crew, missed the scheduled interview. His last known communication was a single email to the producer, containing only 2 words, "It's watching." He has not been heard from since. The journal remains the only artifact ever recovered from the region, now sealed in a private archive by an independent research group specializing in anomalous phenomena. No new photographs have surfaced. No videos. But on a rainy Tuesday in Warsaw, a barista claimed she served coffee to a woman who looked exactly like Sienna. Same eyes, same voice, but when asked her name, the woman paused, blinked twice, and said, "I don't remember." She left behind a napkin with a drawing etched into it. It was a tree. Its roots twisted into a mouth.